Was F.M. Alexander an original thinker, or did he primarily synthesize other people's ideas?
Yes, I think that's the case. I think he was an original thinker, and he also did a great deal of synthesis, perhaps not acknowledging some of those sources as some of us would wish. But I think that if you look at some of the other things that were being done in writings, he obviously read a lot. He read a lot of whatever the anatomy and physiology was at the time that he was active, and say the end of the 20th century, of the 19th century, the beginning of the 20th century. And Jeroen Staring, who's a Dutch writer who's done a great deal of scholarly work looking into Alexander's background of sources, has really pointed to a lot of areas of commonality between what Alexander ended up teaching, or aspects of his teaching, and what other people had been teaching with elocution, methods of training of singers, and various breathing methods that had been developed in different exercise systems that were becoming popular at the time. And he obviously studied those. So he certainly wasn't original with a lot of that stuff, but I think that what he put together in terms of a method of teaching, even though from what I've read and talked with people who had some kind of closer exposure to him as a person, that he may have been a exceptional teacher in terms of working with individual students, but as a teacher of teachers, he probably wasn't that good.
Yeah.
It seems like he didn't really, his work was it's sort of like Krzyzewski's in a way, and in a way the kind of problems that I've had integrating this mind and body stuff, because people tend to separate them. Mm-hmm. He was dealing with an area that doesn't really fit very well into people's ordinary conceptual schemes. And so I think that I sense that he had problems putting what he was trying to do into words.
F.M. Alexander.
Yeah. And that may have spilled over into his attempts to train other people to do what he was doing. Somehow he managed to train enough people who got it, who were then able to carry it on. And there's different schools of thought and various, I don't know what you would call it, schools of teaching within the Alexander technique.
Yeah. And
some of them really seem to, there can be some quite heated arguments as to who has the real stuff. And for me, you got to study the tradition. I am a student in terms of Judaism. I'm a great admirer of Rabbi Mordecai Kaplan, who eventually became, he taught for years at the Jewish Theological Seminary, which was the conservative Jewish seminary in the United States. And then at the end of his life, he decided to okay the setting up of a Reconstructionist college. That's what he called his particular take on Judaism. And one of his mottos was, the past has a vote,
but not a veto.
Not a veto.
Yeah.
And that's my attitude pretty much towards any kind of tradition. If you don't know the tradition, if you haven't studied it, and expose yourself to various teachers from different schools that have developed as part of that tradition, then you're probably not going to be a very adequate teacher. But on the other hand, following some form because it's the form doesn't seem adequate either to me. And ultimately, you've got to find your own way and your own style based on what you studied. So that's my philosophy towards the Alexander technique as well.